After what's felt like a very long 8 years of development, Metroid Prime 4 has finally released, and I'm sure many fans both old and new are wondering if it was worth the wait. Well, speaking as a relatively new fan of the series, my answer to that question would be, I guess so? Again, I want to preface this review by stating that Metroid Prime 4 is my first game in the series. I have nowhere near the amount of emotional attachment to Metroid that many longtime fans of this series will surely have, and that will factor into this review. Regardless, I've played and beaten the game, and while I definitely have no intentions of doing it ever again, I still figured it was worth getting my thoughts out and discussing the good and bad of Metroid Prime 4. After being called to a nearby Federation research facility that is currently being attacked by space pirates, Samus goes to investigate and is confronted by none other than Sylux. After a brief battle, Samus is transported away and awakens in the Chrono Tower, where she encounters the Lamorn, an extinct species who call upon Samus to preserve the legacy of their people, as she is what they consider to be the Chosen One. After that, it's revealed that in order to leave this strange new planet, Samus must collect 5 teleporter keys before returning to the tower. Samus gets warped off once more, and the game begins. While I don't think the story completely sucks or anything, I'd be lying if I said I was that interested in it at any point during my playthrough. While I think that some of the cool little extra lore details you can find are interesting, there's not much more than that. Honestly, and I know some people may disagree with me here, my overall main gripe of the story was Sylux himself. Again, this is coming from somebody who's fairly new to this character, so take that for what it is. However, during my time playing, I just didn't feel any real threat from him as this big bad imposing villain. Sure, he pops up at the beginning and a few times during the story, each of which was a nice little surprise, but aside from that, there's nothing. Why should I care about this guy who seemingly hates Samus for no good reason? Hell, even when you do learn his motivations, it doesn't really help his case much, if at all. This is the dude that's been built up for what, 18 years? Once again, maybe it's just a me issue, but I honestly didn't care for him at all during my time playing. I got way more thrill fighting the other bosses than I ever did with Sylux. I can only hope that with the help of another game or two, he'll get fleshed out in a more meaningful way that really amplifies him. Throughout the story, you'll also be meeting different Federation soldiers who act as your allies during your time playing through the different levels. Now, I was pretty indifferent to these guys. While I don't dislike them, if they weren't in the game at all, it would make little to no difference to me. I do at least appreciate how lively they can be. I know that some people might get tired of all the talking, especially when it comes to someone like Mackenzie, for example, but I didn't really hate it. It does, however, make it that much more jarring that Samus doesn't really emote much at all during this game. A few head nods is really all you're getting from her when it comes to communication with these guys, and I have to say, I found that to be a really odd choice. From what I know, while Samus isn't the biggest talker, she still can talk and in the very least has emotions, so seeing her like this was a little weird. Honestly, I think it's because of Samus's lack of connection that I also don't feel as connected to these guys as I was probably intended to be. Again, some cool characters in the mix, but ultimately I could take them or leave them. Now, to get into some positives, I think that this game is gorgeous. There were many times during my playthrough where I would just kind of stop and admire the world around me and all the detail put into it. Whether it was the lush nature of Fury Green or the stormy skies of Vault Forge, this world is jam-packed with loads of details that are just stunning. The soundtracks for these areas are also top-notch, but I suppose that's nothing new when it comes to the Prime series. I really enjoyed most of my time exploring, and with 5 very distinct areas, you're always sure to get a change in scenery before too long, making each of them feel special and unique. This game also runs incredibly well on Switch too, and I never ran into any resolution or frame dips whatsoever. The game even gives you 2 options to pick from, either 4K 60fps or 1080p 120fps, both of which utilize the hardware well. If nothing else, this game wowed me with its visuals from start to finish. Mostly. Gameplay is actually where I believe Metroid Prime 4 shines the most. Samus controls wonderfully, and I never at all felt like the game was too easy or too hard, even if some areas do test you a little bit. To start with the pros, I was a big fan of almost every puzzle and gameplay mechanic that the game introduced to me. Even if the solution wasn't always obvious, I never felt like anything was too on the nose or just blatantly dumb. This game makes you work in some areas and really keeps you on your toes. As I stated earlier, The 5 main areas of this game are packed full of life and stunning visuals, and each one, in some way or another, felt like an extension of the last. Fury Green was the perfect starting point for this game, and it definitely did its job of teaching the player all the intricacies of how this game will work and play moving forward. Volt Forge, while probably my least favorite of the main areas, was still enjoyable all the same, with an interesting layout and a killer aesthetic that really stood out to me the first time I saw it. I also enjoyed the eerie and chilling nature of Icebelt, the fiery pits of Flare Pool, and the cavernous areas of the Great Mines. None of the main dungeons overstayed their welcome, and it felt like every single item and ability I acquired on my journey was well earned. All of Samus's new abilities were extremely fun to use, albeit somewhat simple in some cases. The boss fights in this game were also top notch, with Fenris being a standout. I loved the spectacle of this fight and many of the other ones towards the end of the game, the Omega Griever also being a standout. This fight is a true test of both patience and endurance. Now, while all of this stuff is great, it's everything in between that starts to lose me a little bit. While I enjoyed exploring through the 5 main areas of this game, I'd be lying if I said that they weren't incredibly linear. In fact, I'd say the majority of this game is almost too linear at times, and that will surely disappoint some players. I almost never felt lost or like I didn't know exactly where I was meant to go, because in a lot of instances, the game just spells it out for you. Again, this might work for some, specifically new players, but I can't imagine that longtime fans of this series will be satisfied with this. I know I wasn't a huge fan, and it kind of ruins the point of the game being a Metroidvania. Was this really what took 8 years to develop? Outside of the extreme linearity, there's the Soul Valley, a giant open world desert section that you'll be traversing between each major area in the game. Now, I remember seeing this area shown off in trailers for the game and being pretty worried for this section. Surely they wouldn't make an embarrassingly large and barren open world with little to do. Well, unfortunately, the Soul Valley is everything I feared it would be. This is, without a doubt, my least favorite area and really thing about this game. Traversing this area was a f***ing chore, and it didn't really get better no matter how long I played. Aside from these green crystals needed for story progression, there's not much else out here for players to enjoy. This area does not service the game whatsoever and breaks the pace so much it's honestly ridiculous. It also doesn't help that there is zero fast travel for Samus in this game whatsoever. Why not just make some sort of hub where she can pick and choose which area to fly to, or God forbid the ability to teleport to and from base camp at the very least? Sure, the bike is very cool and controls well, all things considered, but I just can't get behind what we've been given to use it on. The valley is just boring, and I really wonder who thought this was a good idea. Honestly, this is just really disappointing because whenever this game does do something right, it does it in spades. But when it missteps hard as shit, and it's really hard to ignore. There were even moments during my time playing where I considered whether or not I should actually go through with beating the game simply because of how bad the pacing often felt. While I did end up completing Prime 4 for the sake of this review, I was left wondering if that experience was really all the game had to offer. Once again, I don't have nearly the same amount of nostalgia for these games as many other reviewers or even casual players, so maybe that played a significant part in my enjoyment of this game. I can admit that. Still though, what I played was nothing more than an okay experience at best, and as a new fan that wanted to give this series a shot, Prime 4 gave me a pretty bad first impression. The highs are high and the lows are low. Great visuals, an outstanding soundtrack, and fun to use items unfortunately couldn't outweigh the boring linear structure of the game, occasional pacing issues, and a late game crystal hunt that would put Donkey Kong Bonanza to shame. If you enjoyed Prime 4, that's great, and I'm genuinely glad that you were able to see what I wasn't. However, I found myself slogging through this game at times and really forcing enjoyment out of what I could, simply because of how inconsistent it all feels. The game started strong for me, even if it did feel a tad bit slow, but then as I progressed, those feelings of curiosity and that need for exploration just went away. I wasn't a big fan of how the game felt like it needed to hand things to me on a silver platter, or how the main antagonist was barely an antagonist whatsoever. Even as I was writing notes for the game during my playthrough, I didn't have much to say about it. That's just how underwhelmed I was. I can only imagine how it must feel to be a diehard fan of this series only to have this game be the result of an almost decade-long development cycle. All in all, I found Metroid Prime 4 to be an extremely mediocre time, and while it isn't the worst by any means, the game plays it almost too safe and causes the flow to feel like something more akin to Zelda rather than a Metroid game that was 8 years in the making. Overall, an extremely lackluster title that I wish I could have enjoyed just a little bit more.